There was a time when Catholicism was not welcomed, when entire nations rejected it with closed borders, strict laws, and harsh punishments. For centuries, the Church was silenced in places where leaders feared its message, where faith was seen as a threat to power. Yet history always has a way of surprising. Today, 15 nations that once rejected Christianity now embrace Catholicism with growing devotion. These are not just statistics. They are living stories of faith, revived stories from distant islands, bustling cities, quiet villages where the Church once struggled to survive. In each of these countries, Catholicism is no longer a forbidden word, but a shared identity, shaping communities and inspiring hope. Over the next few minutes, we'll journey through these remarkable places, discover what changed, and meet the people who made it possible. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe so you won't miss the powerful stories that follow. Number 1. Lithuania. Imagine a nation in medieval Europe that still clung to its pagan traditions while all of its neighbors had already embraced Christianity. That was Lithuania. For centuries, it proudly resisted conversion, holding on to ancient rituals and gods. But in 1387, everything changed. Grand Duke Jogula, one of the most powerful rulers of the region, married Queen Jadwiga of Poland. To seal this union and strengthen his realm, he accepted baptism and introduced Catholicism to his people. From that moment, Catholicism was woven into the very heart of Lithuanian identity. But history would test this young faith again and again. During centuries of Russian imperial control, and later the long years of Soviet occupation, churches were closed, priests were spied on, public worship was punished. Yet Lithuanians never abandoned their faith. On a quiet hill near Elia, people began planting crosses in secret. At first a few, then dozens, then thousands. The Hill of Crosses became a silent protest against oppression. You cannot erase belief. Soviet authorities bulldozed the site several times, but each time the crosses returned, stronger and more numerous than before. When Lithuania finally regained its independence in 1990, freedom of worship was restored. Today, more than 74% of Lithuanians identify as Catholic. That is about 2.8 million people across 8 dioceses. Pilgrimages to the Hill of Crosses and other sacred sites continue to draw thousands, reminding the world that Lithuania's faith endured centuries of darkness and now shines brightly. It is a story of resilience, a living proof that once faith takes root in a people, it cannot be destroyed. Number 2. Japan. In 1549, a Jesuit missionary named Saint Francis Xavier arrived on Japan's shores. His mission lit a fire of faith that spread quickly. Within a few decades, tens of thousands of Japanese had embraced Catholicism. Churches rose in places like Nagasaki, and entire communities lived joyfully in their new belief. But this sudden growth alarmed the ruling elite. By the early 1600s, the Tokugawa shogunate saw Catholicism as a threat to their authority and unity. They issued a complete ban on Christianity. Priests were expelled, churches destroyed, and believers ordered to renounce their faith. Those who refused faced torture or execution, yet many did not give up. They became known as the hidden Christians. For more than 2 centuries, they kept their faith alive in secret. They disguised their prayers as folk songs, passed down the rosary orally, and even transformed statues of Mary into figures that resembled Buddhist goddesses so they would not be discovered. Imagine living your entire life and the lives of your children and grandchildren, never able to attend a public mass or see a priest, yet still clinging to the faith of your ancestors. That was the reality of hidden Christians in Japan. When the ban was finally lifted in 1873, missionaries returned. To their astonishment, they discovered entire communities that had preserved the Catholic faith without clergy, sacraments, or public worship for over 200 years. This is one of the most extraordinary survival stories in Catholic history. Today, Japan is home to about 437,000 Catholics, served by 773 parishes across 15 dioceses. Though Catholics are a minority, only 0.35% of the population, their history is a testimony to unshakable devotion. Nagasaki, once a place of persecution, now welcomes pilgrims from all over the world. Its churches and martyr sites remind us that even in the face of total rejection, Catholicism endured and re-emerged with strength. Number 3. South Korea. The story of Catholicism here is unique. It was not planted first by foreign missionaries, but by Koreans themselves. In the late 1700s, Korean scholars traveled to China on diplomatic missions. There they encountered Catholic writings, translated by Jesuits into Chinese books on theology, philosophy, and morality. These works fascinated them, and when they returned home, they shared what they had learned. They baptized one another, formed small communities, and began practicing the faith. Among them was St. Andrew Kim Tegan, the first Korean-born priest, executed in 1846, after returning secretly from seminary training abroad. His courage, and that of countless others, became the foundation of Korea's Catholic identity. Finally, in the late 19th century, Korea opened to the outside world. Foreign missionaries arrived, churches were built, and Catholicism gained recognition. Through the turbulence of wars and political upheavals, the faith grew steadily. Today, South Korea is one of the most vibrant Catholic nations in Asia. Nearly 6 million Koreans, around 11% of the population, are Catholic. The country is now a missionary powerhouse, sending priests and religious to serve in over 90 nations. Think about that. A church once persecuted at home now helps spread the gospel worldwide. From secret scholars to global missionaries, South Korea's story is a powerful example of how faith once hidden can flourish beyond imagination. Number 4. Vietnam. The Catholic story in Vietnam is one of fire, sword, and a mother's love. Missionaries first brought Catholicism in the 16th century, and it found a home among certain communities. But it also faced strong opposition from emperors who saw it as foreign and dangerous. Emperor Min Mang in the 19th century outlawed Catholicism completely. Churches were torn down. Missionaries were executed. Local converts were forced to abandon their faith or die. Thousands chose martyrdom. Yet, in the midst of this storm, something remarkable happened. In 1798, a group of Catholics fleeing persecution into the jungles of Quang Tri province reported seeing an apparition of the Virgin Mary at Lavang. She appeared to comfort them, assuring them of her protection. This vision gave persecuted Catholics hope and courage to continue. Lavang has since become Vietnam's most beloved Marian shrine, a place of pilgrimage that still welcomes hundreds of thousands each year. French colonial rule later offered protection, and the church expanded. Today, Vietnam is home to around 7 million Catholics, about 7.4% of the population, spread across 27 dioceses. The faithful gather not only in bustling cathedrals of Ho Chi Minh City, but also in small, rural parishes. The shrine of Our Lady of Lavang remains a beacon of faith, a reminder that even when religion is outlawed, faith in the Mother of Christ brings strength to endure. Number 5. Mongolia. If there is a story that shows how Catholicism can disappear for centuries and then return, it is Mongolia. In the 1200s, papal envoys traveled across the vast steppes to the Mongol Empire. For a brief time, the church had a presence, serving diplomats and a handful of converts. But as the empire fractured, Catholic life faded until it was completely gone. Centuries passed without even a trace of Catholicism. In the 20th century, communism came to Mongolia. Religion of any kind was dismantled. Churches, monasteries, and faith communities were wiped out. By the early 1990s, Catholicism had been absent for generations. When Mongolia embraced democracy in 1992, missionaries returned. They found fewer than 20 Catholics in the whole country. Imagine beginning a church almost from zero, yet that is exactly what happened. Slowly, schools and parishes were built. Social projects helped the poor. Missionaries lived alongside locals, planting seeds of faith. Today, there are about 1,500 Catholics in Mongolia, spread across 8 parishes. It may sound small, but their presence is powerful. In 2022, Pope Francis appointed Giorgio Marengo, then only 48 years old, as a cardinal, the youngest in the world, giving Mongolia's tiny Catholic community a place on the global stage. And in 2023, Pope Francis himself visited Mongolia, blessing its people and honoring their perseverance. Number 6. Cambodia. Before 1975, Catholicism in Cambodia was a small community made up mostly of Vietnamese immigrants and a few native Cambodians. It was never a dominant religion, but it had a gentle presence through schools, parishes, and charitable works. Yet when the Khmer Rouge came to power, everything changed overnight. Their radical vision saw religion as an enemy of the state. All forms of belief, whether Buddhism, Christianity, or traditional practices, were outlawed. Catholicism was crushed almost completely. Priests were arrested and executed. Church buildings were destroyed or turned into storage facilities.
Ordinary.
Believers were deported, killed, or forced into silence. For 4 years, the church seemed to vanish entirely from Cambodian life. When the regime finally fell in 1979, survivors began to emerge. A handful of priests who had escaped execution returned cautiously. Small groups of believers who had kept their faith hidden came together again. But the new government still viewed religion with suspicion, so the church had to rebuild slowly. Almost silently, focusing on service rather than visibility. Decades passed, and little by little, the Catholic community gained trust. Instead of trying to expand rapidly, it focused on helping people through schools, clinics, and relief projects. Children of all faiths were welcomed in Catholic schools. Families in poverty received health care and food from Catholic charities. This quiet service became the church's way of showing Christ's love in a land scarred by tragedy. Today, Catholics in Cambodia make up less than 0.5% of the population, but they are respected. They live under 2 apostolic vicariates, Phnom Penh and Battambang. They may be small in number, but their faith is alive, strong, and deeply. Number 7. Albania. Imagine an entire country where religion was not only discouraged, but made completely illegal. That was Albania in 1967. The communist leader Enver Hoxha declared Albania the world's first officially atheist state. Churches, mosques, and monasteries were shut down or demolished. Clergy were imprisoned or sent to forced labor camps. Even owning a Bible or wearing a crucifix could lead to arrest. Icons and relics were confiscated, smashed, or hidden away in secret by the faithful. For more than 2 decades, there was no public worship of any kind in Albania. The Catholic Church, deeply rooted in the country's northern regions, survived only in whispers. Families gathered quietly in their homes, saying prayers in secret, passing down traditions in hushed voices. It was an act of courage simply to teach your child the sign of the cross. When communism collapsed in 1990, religion was legalized again. The Catholic Church emerged from the shadows, battered but not destroyed. Parishes reopened, feast days were celebrated publicly, and churches once closed were rebuilt. The revival was especially strong in the north, where Catholic heritage ran deep. Today, about 10% of Albanians are Catholic. Feast day processions that once risked arrest now move openly through city streets with music, banners, and joy. Albania's story is one of resurrection. A country that once tried to erase religion now celebrates its faith again. It proves that no government, no matter how powerful, can erase what is written on the hearts of believers. Number 8. Ukraine. In 1946, under pressure from Moscow, the Soviet regime declared the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church illegal. Its properties were confiscated and handed over to the Russian Orthodox Church. Bishops who resisted were imprisoned or executed. Priests were forced underground. For the next 4 decades, the church survived in total secrecy. Imagine priests celebrating the divine liturgy in barns, forests, or hidden basements. Imagine children learning catechism quietly in family homes, never able to show their faith in public. This was the life of millions of Ukrainian Catholics. Their church existed completely underground, yet it never died. In 1989, as the Soviet Union began to collapse, the church was legalized again. During the ongoing war, Catholic parishes provide shelter, distribute food and medicine, and offer hope in times of darkness. The faith that once survived in secrecy now shines publicly. reminding the world of the strength of a people who refuse to let their church be destroyed. Ukraine's Catholic story is one of courage, survival, and witness in the face of oppression. Number 9. Romania. In 1948, the communist government outlawed the Romanian Greek Catholic Church. Its bishops were arrested, its property seized, and its believers told to join the Orthodox Church. For the next 41 years, Catholics had to practice their faith in secret. Families gathered quietly in homes to celebrate liturgies. Religious objects were hidden away, passed down like treasures from one generation to the next. Priests risked their freedom to minister secretly to their flocks. It was a long, silent resistance. In 1989, after the revolution, the church was legalized again. Bishops and priests returned from prison or exile. Seminaries reopened. But the path forward was not easy. Many of the church's historic buildings were still controlled by the Orthodox Church, leading to disputes that continue even today. Yet despite these challenges, the Catholic community thrives. By 2025, Romania is home to nearly 900,000 Catholics. Both Latin Rite and Greek Catholic, they openly celebrate liturgies, run schools, and serve the poor. What was once an outlawed faith has regained its place in public life. Romania's story shows us that even when justice is delayed, faith finds a way to grow again. Number 10. The United Kingdom. Catholicism in Britain faced centuries of rejection after the English Reformation in the 1500s. King Henry VIII's break from Rome led to the suppression of monasteries, the outlawing of the Mass, and the exclusion of Catholics from public life. Harsh penal laws made it illegal to practice openly. Families who remained Catholic had to worship in hidden chapels, risking fines, imprisonment, or worse. Even Catholic education was restricted, forcing families to send their children abroad for religious training. For generations, Catholicism survived quietly in secret chapels and whispered prayers. A turning point came in 1829 with the Catholic Emancipation Act. Catholics were finally allowed to worship freely, build churches, and re-establish religious orders. Irish immigration in the 19th century brought millions of new Catholics to Britain, filling churches and schools. Later waves of immigration from Poland, Italy, Africa, and Asia added even more vitality. Today, Catholicism is woven into the national fabric of the United Kingdom. In England and Wales, there are millions of Catholics, with mass attendance rising in recent years. Scotland has about 723,000 Catholics, and in Northern Ireland, Catholics make up more than 42% of the population. Historic cathedrals like Westminster stand alongside new parish churches built for immigrant communities. Catholic schools, universities, and charities continue to shape education and social life. What was once a persecuted faith is now a vibrant and visible part of society. The United Kingdom's story shows that even after centuries of rejection, Catholicism can return to the heart of a nation. Number 11. Sweden. For centuries after the Protestant Reformation, Sweden's rulers worked hard to keep Catholicism out. The state enforced a strict Lutheran identity, making it illegal for Catholics to practice their faith openly. Mass could not be celebrated in public. Priests were not allowed to minister, and citizens who converted to Catholicism faced punishment. For generations, Catholics in Sweden lived almost entirely underground, surviving quietly without the ability to express their faith. Even into the 20th century, the law required all citizens to belong to the state church, and Catholics had no full civic rights. Imagine being denied equality in your own country simply because of your religion. That was the reality for Swedish Catholics. Finally, in 1951, Sweden introduced full religious freedom. This moment opened the door for Catholic life to grow again. Immigration then brought new waves of Catholics from Poland, Croatia, the Middle East, and Latin America. Each community carried its own devotions, traditions, and languages, enriching the Swedish Church. Today, more than 150,000 Catholics live in Sweden. With 126,000 officially registered under the Diocese of Stockholm, there are now 44 parishes stretching from the busy streets of Malmö to the icy landscapes of the far north. Mass is celebrated in multiple languages, reflecting the global nature of the Catholic faith. Annual feast days and processions, once banned for centuries, now bring Catholics together in joy and unity. Sweden's story is a reminder that even after 400 years of rejection, faith can re-emerge with new strength. Number 12. Norway. When Norway adopted its constitution in 1814, it was determined to protect its Lutheran identity. That meant strict restrictions on Catholicism. Jesuits, in particular, were banned from even entering the country. Catholic institutions could not be established freely, and public worship outside the state church was tightly controlled. This legal wall remained for more than a century. In fact, the Jesuit ban lasted until 1956, making Norway one of the last European countries to remove such a law. But after World War II, Norway began to change. Immigration and labor recruitment programs opened its doors to workers from Catholic-majority countries like Poland and the Philippines. Refugee resettlement later brought Catholics from Vietnam, Latin America, and Africa. Suddenly, parishes that had once been tiny were alive with new voices, new traditions, and new celebrations. By 2023, Catholics made up about 3.1% of Norway's population. The Diocese of Oslo alone registered more than 145,000 members, and the numbers keep growing. Mass is now celebrated in over 20 languages across the country: Polish, Vietnamese, Spanish, Tamil, Tagalog, and more. The liturgy in Norway has become a reflection of the universal church, alive with diversity and devotion. The same constitution that once excluded Catholics now protects them, and today, Catholicism is one of Norway's most vibrant expressions of faith. Number 13. Mexico. Catholicism has deep roots in Mexico, but the 20th century brought one of the fiercest rejections of the Church in its history. After the Mexican Revolution, the 1917 Constitution introduced strict anti-Catholic laws. The Church was stripped of legal rights, religious orders were dissolved, and priests were forbidden to wear clerical clothing in public. Worship was confined to church buildings, and even their restrictions were heavy. Communities felt their faith pushed out of public life. The situation grew so severe that by the late 1920s, ordinary Mexicans rose in resistance. The Cristero War erupted, a fierce struggle where farmers, teachers, priests, and entire villages defended their right to worship freely. Many gave their lives shouting "Viva Cristo Rey!" "Long live Christ the King!" as they faced execution. Over time, the government softened its stance, and slowly restrictions loosened. In 1992, Mexico restored full diplomatic ties with the Vatican, marking a new chapter of freedom. Today, Catholicism is not only strong in Mexico, it is central to its identity. More than 97 million people, about 77% of the population, are Catholic. Each December, millions travel to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, making it one of the largest religious pilgrimages in the world. Streets fill with pilgrims carrying candles, flowers, and prayers, a living testimony that Catholicism not only survived rejection, but flourishes as the heartbeat of the Mexican people. Number 14. Cuba. When Fidel Castro's revolution triumphed in 1959, Cuba became an officially atheist state. The connection between the Cuban people and the church never truly broke. In 1992, the government amended the constitution to allow freedom of worship. This opened a slow but steady return of Catholic life. A turning point came with 3 papal visits: John Paul II in 1998, Benedict XVI in 2012, and Francis in 2015. Each visit drew enormous crowds and sent a clear message that the Church still lived in the heart of Cuba. Today, measuring Catholicism in Cuba is complex. Surveys suggest that about 27% of Cubans identify as Catholic, but the Church itself counts more than 60% as baptized. This shows the blend of cultural Catholicism and personal practice unique to the island. Revival has not been sudden, but like a tide slowly returning. Churches that were once quiet are now filled with music and prayer again. Catholicism in Cuba stands as a reminder that even under decades of suppression, faith can wait patiently for its chance to reappear. Number 15. Timor-Leste. Our journey ends in a small nation, but one with one of the most powerful Catholic stories in the modern world. Timor-Leste, also known as East Timor, lies between Southeast Asia and the Pacific. For centuries, it was a Portuguese colony, and Catholicism became deeply rooted in its people. But when Indonesia occupied the nation in 1975, the church faced immense pressure. Yet instead of collapsing, it became the very soul of resistance. Bishops, priests, and lay leaders gave the people courage when their voices were silenced. Churches became sanctuaries, not only for worship, but for safety and hope. The church fed the hungry, educated the young, and told the world about the suffering of its people. When independence finally came in 2002, Catholicism stood at the heart of the nation's new identity. Today, where the 97% of Timor-Leste citizens are Catholic, one of the highest percentages anywhere in the world. Sunday Mass attendance here is among the highest globally, with churches filled from morning until night. Catholicism is not just a religion in Timor-Leste, it is the backbone of the nation, guiding its schools, healthcare, and even its politics. This small country closes our journey as a shining example of how faith, once rejected, can become the very heartbeat of a free people. From Lithuania's hill of crosses to the mountains of Timor-Leste, these 15 nations show us something powerful. Catholicism can be silenced for a season, but it cannot be erased. Across centuries, across continents, across dictatorships and revolutions, the faith has always found a way to return. Sometimes, it returned quietly through whispered prayers, boldly through public resistance, but it always returned. These stories prove that faith planted deeply can withstand anything. Which of these nations' stories touched you the most? Do you see similar changes happening in your own country or community? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can reflect on them too. If you found this journey inspiring, give this video a like. And before you go, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next powerful story of faith's endurance around the world.